we went in at 25 weeks. They did a scan, and again, you've got another poor sonographer who's can't say anything. So she scans, then scans the other baby and quickly goes out. And I looked at John and I said, she's gone, isn't she? And he just nodded his head, and I just lost it. It's kind of one of those things you're anticipating. But when it actually happens, it really rocks you. It's just a really raw, tough feeling to be told, yep, that other baby that you've been feeling kick in your belly and has had a heartbeat all this long, and you think maybe something's going to change or like there's going to be a miracle. She's not there anymore. She's gone.
Yeah. I'm Megan Armstrong. Welcome to Life 6 Feet Above. 6 Feet Above was created when I started to share my story of spending 16 years wanting to be 6 feet under to now living a life full and happy 6 feet above. The more that I started to talk about my journey, my struggles, and my past, the more I realized people were genuinely interested and not judgmental at all, which is what I'd feared for so long. In fact, other people wanted to talk about their story as well, and for some reason they trusted me to do so. So the 6 Feet Above podcast is my way of helping to share other people's stories, finding out what works for them to create a life of happiness. Before we start this episode, I want to let you know it has some explicit language and some very serious subject matter. It may be triggering or sensitive to certain people. Please listen with discretion. This is Kelly's story. So today I am joined by my good friend, Kelly Henderson. And again, one of the people that I know in the community through fitness. We go way back to when I first moved here. My first job was at Flywheel. So Kelly, thank you so much for joining the 6 Feet Above podcast.
So excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you. And it's funny because I always do like a pre-interview with people. And I meet for coffee and want to meet, in person and just kind of hear about their story. And I remember when I launched season 1, you were just so supportive and so encouraging, and you've always been supportive no matter what I've done in my life. So I want to thank you for that.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, we had to do a FaceTime call because everything went down and the world shut down in March. Yeah. And I just wanted to wait until we could meet again face to face to do the actual recording. I just think there's something about like being in the room with somebody, and if you have to do it over Zoom or you have to do it with Squadcast, there's this thing that they do for podcasting, totally fine. But in my heart, I wanted to wait and like see you and see that little pregnant little belly.
I love everything in person. So that is like everything. I'm like, when can we get back to being face to face safely, obviously, but I feel exactly the same way. There's just something about being with people and that human connection. And that's what a lot of us have been missing the last 3 or 4 months.
And I think it's just easier to talk to people in person. There's, you feel the energy of the other person, and it's hard to get that through a FaceTime or through a Zoom call. So here we are.
We're here.
Here we are. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Sure.
What do you do?
Okay.
Here we go.
Could be so many things. So my name is Kelly, like you mentioned, and I am from Boca Raton, Florida, originally. Okay. I have been in Atlanta for about almost 13 years now. After graduating from University of Florida, I moved here. And I've had a couple careers since then. Yes, you have. I guess I'm not meant to be a 30-year person in one career. God's taken me a lot of places. Yeah, I've been a teacher. I have been a fitness studio manager. That's how we got to know each other at Flywheel. And now I am a preschool director.
Where do you?
So I'm a preschool director in Roswell.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you live up there?
I do. I live in Roswell. Mm-hmm.
So tell me about growing up in Boca Raton, because we're from pretty much opposite sides of this country.
Yes. Homer is a little far from Boca.
Homer's real cold. Real cold.
Boca's real warm.
Yeah.
And real salty.
Yeah.
The people sometimes are on the salty side. Growing up in Boca was incredible and also a little bit sheltering. So I think, you and I kind of talked about this. Boca is a beautiful city in South Florida. It's about 45 minutes north of Miami. And if anybody hears the word Boca, usually it's in the context of it's where people go to retire. So it's a beautiful coastal town, great place to grow up, great place to have a family, but it's definitely a little sheltering. You are not super aware of some things going on in the world unless the people raising you make a valiant effort to expose you to different things going on in the world.
So like very white Christian, or is it more about race, religion, or just like
so much that, just more about privilege in general.
Okay.
You're seeing a lot of nice new cars when people turn 16, very lavish birthday parties at a young age. It is definitely a see and be seen kind of feeling growing up. While it's a great place to raise a family, it's definitely a place that will make you feel like you constantly are looking for more.
Like keeping up with the Joneses a little bit?
It's a very much keeping up with the Joneses. Who got this first? Who has this? It's it's kind of a...
Did you feel that pressure growing up, like in high school? Or
I did. And, my parents did an awesome job of really kind of exposing me to this is not just the real world. This is where you live and it's a great place, but this is not quite reality. So they did a really good job. My dad's office was in Fort Lauderdale. So he was always bringing my sister and I down there so we could kind of experience where his warehouse was. But as far as Boca goes, it was... Yeah, it could be a tough place to grow up if you felt like you didn't have the newest purse or the newest, whatever it was.
Right. Mm-hmm. What did your parents do?
So my mom wrote for the paper. She wrote for the Sun Sentinel for many years in South Florida.
We're going to have 18-year-olds listening and be like,
what's a paper? Yes. That's, publication printed on
every day.
Every day came to your house.
Yep.
And then my dad owned a circuit board company, and he owned that company for 30 years, and he was the president of the company. He took it over from my grandfather and built it into 3 or 4 other businesses, and sold it ultimately when we went to college.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Are they still working now? Or are they still in Boca?
They're no longer in Boca. When I moved to Atlanta and then my sister shortly followed, my parents were very excited to make a change and move from South Florida to be close to us. Family was always super important. Yeah. And I think a part of them staying behind just didn't feel right. They wanted to kind of be in our lives as we got married and had children. So they live in Alpharetta, Georgia now.
Okay. Yeah. And you have a sister.
And I have a sister. Yep. She's 3 years younger, Jamie. And so she lives in Roswell now also. She just made the big suburban move from Midtown to Roswell about a year ago. And I work with her husband. So we are very involved with each other.
Very close-knit family.
Yes. Very involved.
So let me ask you about, and this is something we actually didn't talk about because it wasn't a thing at the time. This whole privilege, right? We are both white females and we come from really nice families. And, looking back, I'm like, I never struggled. I still will never have to struggle. My parents will always make sure that I'm taken care of no matter how old I am. I would imagine that's kind of the same for you. Yeah. With your family. And, but I feel like my parents did such a good job to not necessarily like culture me, but to just teach me that no matter who someone is, where they come from, what they look like, what religion they are, human beings are just human beings and no one's any better or worse than you are. Yeah. Is that kind of how you were brought up too? Yeah, my parents are, they're really phenomenal. They were just so involved in my life. And I think that involvement and being a part, it made me have conversations with them growing up. It made me trust them with what was going on in my life, especially, up until college, I would say. It was just a great environment in that they really did make sure we knew a lot of things that were going on in the world, and they didn't try to shelter us. Right. And yeah, this is such a tough time right now. I love that you do your podcast. Everybody who speaks on it is only an expert in their own story, basically. Exactly. So nobody's here to be giving advice or whatnot, but they're experts in what they've experienced. I love that we're in a time where people are going through so much and they're super isolated, and they are isolated from COVID. And now we are isolated if we don't agree with each other on certain things. So it's so great that you're talking about having people on and talking about how we can kind of
work together to sit down and be face to face, and why like human interaction is so important.
And I don't think, we don't have to agree with each other. We're never going to, but I think once we understand the way someone is, it's like, oh, okay, there's less judgment. There's more compassion. There's more grace.
Yes.
And your faith is very big.
Yes.
Was that growing up, or was that a newer thing now that you're older and married, or?
Faith has always been a part of our lives.
Okay.
As far as how close it has waned over the years. Right now it's super close. But when we were little, we were very brought up in the church, super involved in our youth group in high school. You could count on us to be at church pretty much almost every Sunday. Our church was like a 5-minute drive from our house.
Yeah.
And even if my dad would be yelling at me to get in the car, we'd make it even if we were a couple minutes late. So they really did a good job of keeping us grounded in our faith.
So it sounds like, growing up throughout high school, at least, it was kind of smooth sailing, right?
Yeah.
Never really had a lot of drama or any sort of mental health struggles yourself. But you got into college and you were in a relationship that kind of turned very toxic. And I want you, as much as you're willing to talk about that,
sure,
because I think that kind of sets the precedent for, the big thing that we're going to get to with your husband now.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing I would say with my parents are high school sweethearts.
Mine are too.
So, I mean, you have high school sweetheart parents, and that's amazing, but whoa,
they don't get it.
What like a pillar to live up to. Yes. You feel like you better, I didn't, I had a high school boyfriend. Well, he wasn't going to be the one. Well, I better find one in college, and we have to be married all these years. Is just this kind of, they never wanted that for me. They just wanted me to be happy. But part of me wanted.
Is that a Southern thing?
That love.
Like the
high school sweethearts?
No, like the go to college to find somebody.
Probably. I mean, SEC girl here. I feel like a lot of people are looking, what do they call it? The MRS degree. The
MRS degree. I've heard of that.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that going on.
When I moved to the South, I'm like, wait, what does that mean?
Why is everyone married?
Why is everyone married at 24?
Whoa. Yeah. So I think going into college, maybe subconsciously in the back of my mind, I went in kind of thinking I needed to meet my person while I was doing my 4 years in college, while I was there to get a great education and meet lots of people and have this whole new experience. I really was thinking like, I gotta come out of this with my partner in life.
Right.
Yeah. So I went to University of Florida. Go Gators.
Get it.
Gators. That was where I was always going to go. My parents also both went there. So a lot of following in footsteps. My uncle went there. Yeah. Very family oriented, like wasn't allowed to apply to Florida State. It was not even an option. Even if it was a great school, it's just like, you can't go there. Nope, not allowed. So went to University of Florida and had a great freshman year, but I joined a sorority. I started to pay more attention to how I dressed and how I looked. So I didn't think in Boca, you could kind of be casual and beachy, and the sorority made me start to kind of wonder about like my hair and my makeup. And I ultimately went blonde. Like I was pretty brunette in high school.
Right.
So I started to find myself worrying about what I looked like and working out more and wanting to fit in. And then also like trying to meet the right person to be with.
Right.
Yeah.
So all the external
pressures. Yes. And then I would say this was a time where I wasn't especially connected to God. I wasn't going to church. I was just very caught up in my new world and all the experiences that a college student, there's just so many new inputs.
Yeah.
You've got new friends. You're learning new things. You're living alone for the first time. Like, how do I feed myself?
Yeah. Totally normal things for females, especially females.
Yeah.
To
anybody going off to college listening, like just give yourself grace during this time.
And know that you're good enough.
You're good enough. And there's a lot of learning to do, and just take it day by day. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I met my boyfriend sophomore year, and he was somebody who had gone to my high school. And so that, going back to like my parents, here's this guy from my high school, and he was very well known in high school. I knew his sister. We had some similar friends, some commonalities back home. I'm thinking, this is so great. This is this guy from where I grew up. We're going to see each other when we're home on Christmas break and Thanksgiving and summer. This must be it.
Yeah.
This is going to
kind
be
of
a great
safety
fit.
net too, right?
Yeah. Just something about someone who's familiar.
Yeah.
You kind of already know some things about them, and makes you trust them a little bit more. And and think that this is going to be a really good fit.
Yep.
Yes. So
and
that
it was not.
It was not, ultimately, sorry to flip to the end of the book. It was not. So as you and I kind of talked about, this relationship, ultimately, it lasted for 4 years. So it lasted most of my college experience. And part of me can look back and look at and almost cut my college experience in half. I can look at all the good things, and then I look at this relationship. And it's almost like I compartmentalize this relationship so I can focus on the positive parts of college, because this relationship really, over the course of the years, like sophomore year, junior year, senior year, and then ultimately my year in grad school before I moved to Atlanta, I kind of slowly became a shell of my former who I was. I've always been super involved in everything. Like I'm the yes girl. Like, yes, I want to try that. Yes, I'll do your book club. Yes, I'll play table tennis.
Right.
Like whatever it is, I wanted to experience it. And this person really stifled a lot of that from me. He really made me feel less than. He over time, it really turned into an emotionally abusive relationship. I really questioned who I was. I didn't see myself as a good person, a good girlfriend, a good friend, a good daughter, because of the inputs I was getting from this person verbally.
Right.
Yes.
So looking back, everything's 2020. Was there a point while you were in this relationship that you started thinking like, this isn't me? Because, and I'm just comparing, I've never had this situation, but I'm comparing it to my years of depression. It took me a really long time to look in the mirror and be like, there's something wrong here. You don't see it while you're in it. Was that for you the same kind of thing for you? Or?
You really don't see it while you're in it. You really start to believe this narrative that is spoken over your life when you give a person who is ultimately really toxic power over your thoughts and who you are. And I really did that I let this person really kind of ruin me, and I wasn't seeing myself clearly anymore because I didn't know who I was anymore.
And that goes with business and work and school. Like
it's so easy to get caught up in something that when you look back and you get out of it, you're like, wow, why did I spend so much time in this tough, negative place? I would say it was senior year. He ended up spending a semester, and he was 2 years older than me, doing law school. He ended up spending a semester back in Boca, and I had my senior fall just me. And there were lots of my poor roommate, who's still one of my best friends. I love you, Margot. She had to experience lots of phone calls where I was in my bed crying because I was just being talked down to so much and being told not to go out and not to talk to this person, and lots of awful names that I won't say here, but
so controlling
and just so manipulative. And that was when I started to realize I was having a good time when I wasn't physically around that person. But when the person was physically in my space, it's almost like my glasses would get foggy again. So I had a great senior fall. And then he returned to Gainesville my senior spring. So I'm about to kind of finish up my undergraduate career. Had this great fall, great football season.
Always important.
It was just a really fun one. And again, once he was back, it was like I kind of lost myself again. I was not spending very many nights at home or, where I was supposed to be staying. I was being told I couldn't go to my sorority socials because you have a boyfriend. You can't do those things. And we're not going to hang out with your friends. We're going to hang out with mine, and we're going to do it this way. And, you're such a terrible girlfriend because this, that, or the other.
And again, I try to understand other people now a lot. And obviously there was something going on in his life, or the way he was raised, or he had no self-confidence, or he was threatened. Not to say that what he did was right or an excuse, but now looking back, it's like, okay, that really didn't have a lot to do with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what he did, was on him, right? It affected you, of course, but everyone's got to be responsible for their own life at some point. And did your parents kind of see it, or did they say anything?
And they were kind of like the silent prayer warriors in the background. And I really still appreciate this about them to this day. They quietly started say, you know, this is not right. We're losing you here.
Yeah.
But they never pushed. They let me ultimately find my way out of the relationship myself, which is what I needed to do, because if they had tried to do it themselves, I would still be resenting them. So once I went to grad school, and he was still in Gainesville doing law school, that was kind of the year where everything finally hit ahead. And I just was so lonely and sad in my own feelings. And ultimately, like looking back, like I was depressed because I was, you know, repressed, like who I was, I wasn't able to be. And so I ultimately, finally, I moved to Atlanta, still dating this person.
Really?
Yeah. So we needed physical distance to take a break and get out of the relationship. So it took a really long time.
Let's talk about, and maybe you can't exactly pinpoint it. So I don't know, you know, you let me know. But I think people that are listening that are in this situation, right, that they know it's not good. They know it's toxic, but it's not that they don't have the courage. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to escape. And sometimes, like, you can be incredibly lonely and married or dating or you know, in an amazing job and still be lonely, and all these things that should actually make you feel better don't. And so you start to actually feel worse about it. You're like, here's this guy that looks great from the outside. Most girls would kill to be with him. Right. And here I am, inside my head, you know, second guessing, should someone treat me like this? And ultimately, a lot of women are like, yeah, I'm going to have to put up with this because this is the type of guy I want.
I deserve.
What I deserve. Right.
Yeah. And then there's that fear of, you almost get so used to how you're being treated, which is so terrible, that you would deny yourself something better. But if you're not looking to make a change, you'll stay where you are, and you ultimately won't give yourself the allowance to look for something better and to realize that it's going to be okay on the other side of this. You will, like, your life is going to move forward and great things are ahead.
But it's going to take work.
But it takes work.
And that goes with mental health as well.
And I knew this relationship needed to be over for a while. I think we both did. Like, it was, you know, talking about how things were on him. Like, I have so much empathy for him, because I know he had a lot of things going on and he put a lot of pressure on himself to be the best. And I saw this person recently, and you know, we had a great, fine conversation. Like, we're both married, we have children, and it's nice to look back retrospect. And I asked him when I saw him, I said, "Are we okay?" And he's like, "We're okay." And I was like, "Yeah, we are." So I can look back and have a lot of empathy and major forgiveness, because people are always going through things. And although I didn't deserve to be treated the way I did, we all deserve second chances. We all deserve to get a chance to move forward.
And any 20-year-old is going to go through some life lessons in the next few years. Let me tell you that. Let me tell you that.
All the things.
Might take a little bit longer. Might take a few more years, like myself. But ultimately, you're going to get out of it, and it's going to be so worth it.
It's so worth it, because there's good things waiting for you on the other side. Yeah. So the move to Atlanta was the big turning point.
So
for me.
you got to a point where, like, I don't want to live. I physically can't be near him, but I'm not quite sure how to break up with him.
Yeah, I was really worried that if I stayed kind of in the state of Florida or nearby while he was still finishing school, I was looking for a teaching job. I had finished my master's in education, and I was going into an elementary ed degree, and I had some friends that moved to Atlanta. So I kind of quietly explored the idea of moving to Atlanta. I thought, this is 5 hours away from Gainesville, something new. I think I had visited Atlanta during my grad school year. I think it was for the SEC championship.
Okay.
And I thought that's kind of when the idea started cooking. I was like, I physically need to move myself somewhere else so I can clear my head and start fresh.
So what happened once you got here?
Yeah. So I moved here. I had a really good friend from my sorority who I got to move in with, and I kind of got to start over. It's like I had all these good experiences in college, but it was time for like a new fresh start, a new life. You're starting your career, you're finished with college, which is also a crazy time. We should call like the year you graduate college also like mini like real life, because you're almost not in the real world
Right,
yet.
right.
It's kind of crazy when you get your first job and you're like, oh, I have a little bit of money and
Right.
I'm alone again and I'm in a new place and wow, this
Starts
is
all
exciting.
over again with no, you know, it's exciting, but it's terrifying because
it's terrifying. You're still really young.
You're still really young.
23. I'm still, you don't know a lot, too much at 23.
Right. God, I feel for the seniors this year.
Oh, yes.
Oh, man.
Yes. Such big life changes and so much going on in the world at the same time.
So how long, once you moved to Atlanta, how long did it take for you to finally say, we are done?
Yeah, it took until April.
Oh, wow.
So I moved here in summer 2017, and I think it took until April of 2018. Went home one weekend to Boca, and there was a major thing that happened, and ended up coming into my house, seeing my mom just on the floor in tears, like, you can't do this anymore. And it broke me. It finally... me staying in that relationship, I finally realized the impact it was having on the people around me, and how people wanted to be near me and they wanted me, but they hadn't seen me for so long.
Right.
And I knew my family just really, and I remember my sister's not like a super outright emotional person. I remember her being like, it's gotta end. Aww. And so seeing the people that you cared the most about really finally showing you got to get out.
Yeah.
That's when I said, okay, like I've started a new life. This has to end.
Yeah. Well, good for you.
So ultimately, that's kind of when things got started, and it was time for new things.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you go from, because that's got to create some sort of trauma, right?
Yeah.
And almost a little bit scared to enter another relationship.
Yeah.
But you did at some point.
I did.
And you met an amazing human being.
I did.
He's
and I will
such a good
say,
man.
you know, in the interim, you kind of all of a sudden, sometimes when one of these relationships ends, y'all, you feel really excited about your newfound freedom and how amazing you are for making this big decision. So give yourself some time and don't just, you know, try to, you know, went on lots of great dates and was looking for Mr. Right, but I needed to give myself some time to find me again.
Yes,
so
100%.
Remember that a man or a woman or whoever your partner for life is not a Band-Aid for anything you need to fix inside yourself
and
first.
they're not completing you.
Yeah, and it's not their job to fix you either.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So
you took some time.
I took some time.
Fun.
I had some fun, and I got back into church. So that was finding kind of my church home in Atlanta was huge. Started going to Buckhead Church, which I know a lot of people here are connected with, and just started really getting kind of grounded in what I wanted going forward for my life. Yeah. And then ultimately I met my husband, someday to be husband, about probably 6 months later.
Wow.
Yeah. So pretty quickly, probably maybe a little sooner than I thought.
You know, everything happens for a reason.
You never know. And, you know, didn't know necessarily who's going to be my husband at the time. But we met through mutual friends at a trivia night.
Oh.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. I
Did
was
he
there
ask
to...
you out first? What happened?
No, I was there to meet somebody else. I was being set up with somebody else. And I ultimately met John that night, John Henderson, and kind of thought about him, and then ran into him again about a month later, and kind of went up. I was kind of the one who went up and said, hey, like, kind of liked talking to you that night we met. Perhaps we should hang out, and went on a date from there. And that's kind of where we are today.
Wow. What does John do?
John is a biomedical engineer.
Oh, okay.
I usually get lots of confused faces when I say that.
Yeah, that's like when people say I'm in finance. I'm like, that's all I need to know.
Yes. And John will always say, did you explain my job correctly? Because it's much harder to explain than just being a teacher or, whatever. Right. But he works in medical device trials.
Okay.
Yes. And he went to Georgia Tech. So he just finished a master's in statistics.
Wow.
Yes. So he's a real smart guy and does a lot of work with data and tracking to see if certain devices are effective. And he works in heart failure specifically.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. All right. So
good dude.
you know, again, and I kind of see everyone's life is kind of like a little, like a wave, a little roller coaster, right? Like
you see these
you're
like
on
little
this high.
pinpoints.
Yeah. But we only see the highs.
Yeah.
So at this point, you and I were working at Flywheel together. And like I said before, you are the type of person that just exudes energy and happiness.
Thanks.
And, you know, I moved here knowing my family, my cousins, and that's it. I had no friends, and I knew, didn't even know my roommate really. And you're just so welcoming. And there was a lot of stuff happening at the job that we were both at. And I think we kind of were drawn to each other because we have a similar background. And also I think we are good people at the foundation and
positive.
Yeah, we're positive and the negativity that was going on. People. 100%. So that's kind of where we met. And, from the outside, I'm like, oh, she's got this fiance and everything looks great. And y'all get married and you get pregnant.
So
and
awesome.
you have your first little boy.
Just soaking up each other's awesomeness.
Literally. I'm like, must be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So we, I was teacher for 7 years and then ultimately had just the wonderful opportunity. This was just like a great door being open to get to manage Flywheel and working at the Buckhead one part-time. This goes back to me saying yes to everything. Like, let me teach and then work 4 to 9 at Flywheel in the afternoon so I can get a free membership and get a taste of something different. Exactly. Like, I just want to do all the things. Yeah. Yes, which can sometimes be a big hindrance. I can get to that later. But ultimately end up as the manager of Flywheel at the Alpharetta location, and was so great to get to know people like you through that experience who were positive and upbeat and just like poured their souls into making sure everyone had a great workout and getting to really know the people in our fitness community. Yeah, that's really important to me. Like, really knowing people and making sure that they are known is always been the core of who I am. Yeah. Making people feel special. Yeah. And relationships are super important to me. Friendships, like I will pour into the friendships that I plan to be friends with my entire life because I've decided those relationships matter.
Yeah. And they're worth it.
They're worth it. Yeah. So John and I dated for 4 years. We got engaged, not without hiccups on the way. John and I had like a time where we broke up and got back together because he asked me the hard questions. He said, do you want to be married or do you want to be married to me? And like, he really stopped and made me think. So my husband has always challenged me in a really good way. And not that he's so unsimilar from my former relationship, because they do have similarities, but he is so much more the supporter and cheerleader and the logical, like yin to my yang that the other person never was able to be.
Like doing things for the right reason, not because it looks good.
And questioning you in a way that is because I love you and I support you. And do you want to do that? Or is that the right choice? Not because it bothers me, but because is that right for you?
Right. So when did you decide to start a family?
Yeah. So we had been married, I think, a year. And since we dated so long, we were both kind of gung-ho. Yeah. Well, John was like, I knew when I proposed to you that like we were going to get on the roller coaster.
That's the next
what he
thing.
Says. He's like, I knew. He's like, he always says that him proposing to me was the last big decision he was ever going to make alone. That every decision from there was going to be a group thing.
Yep.
And he said he knew we were going to probably start to try to have a family right after we got married. So it took us about a year, but we got pregnant with Pace, our firstborn.
So sweet.
Very like textbook pregnancy, felt great. Working at Flywheel this whole time. I think I worked up until the day I went into labor.
Yes, I remember this.
Yeah, it was just, we had just opened the Alpharetta studio and I've got this big old belly and went home that night. John and I were going to go have some Italian food. And I said, I don't think we're going to have Italian food. Went into the hospital and the next day we had Pace and he came on his due date. So that was just a really great time of life. Like the job was great. The pregnancy was great. We're super excited about this newborn we've welcomed into our home. Still really newlyweds too. Yeah. We'd only been married probably a little under 2 years when Pace was born.
Okay.
Yeah, and we made a big suburban move, which was probably the only minorly traumatic thing for me. I was not quite ready to leave my city life.
Yeah.
But moved to Roswell and was just started kind of this great life with our firstborn.
Yeah. And had you talked about having more kids at some point?
Yeah. John and I had always kind of said we're both from two. You know, I've got a sister and he's got a sister and I kind of always wanted 3 a little bit, but we're both really familiar with 2. And John was very much like, I think I just want 2 children.
So everything went well during the pregnancy, post-pregnancy.
Yeah.
Pace is healthy, great boy. Wow. Got lucky.
Yep.
So how old was he when you said, let's do this again?
Yeah. So it took us a while to make Pace. So I knew I didn't want to wait that long. I think he was about, might be like a year and a half.
Okay.
He was about a year and a half when I said, let's go ahead and start working on the
number
next
2.
one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, let's work on number 2. And let me tell y'all, getting pregnant, there's nothing glamorous about that. There's nothing. Like, if you're really trying, it's a lot of hard work, and it kind of takes out some of the fun.
Right.
What you think would be fun becomes not fun really quickly when you're really focused on a goal together.
Yes. That's a big goal.
It's business. You know? It kind of reminds me of Friends with Monica when they were trying to get pregnant.
Yeah.
So, but ultimately, we get blessed and we find out we're pregnant again. And I think Pace was probably about 2 at this point, or getting close to being 2.
So not only were you pregnant again, but you were pregnant with twins.
Yes. So we went in for our first ultrasound, and we found they were moving the little thing across my belly, and there's one, and there's another one. There's 2 heartbeats. So, you know, and John came to all the appointments with me, and I remember just looking at him like, oh gosh, he's going to think I did this on purpose. I didn't do it. Oh gosh.
Wait, do twins run in your family?
No, not at all. They
For
really
his family
don't. Not his family either.
Wow.
There's no like linkage to that really at all.
So what was your initial like, oh my gosh,
shock. Yeah, shock. And a little bit of excitement from me initially, because I thought
3.
I kind of wanted 3, and I thought this was going to be the only way we would get 3 because I thought, and John said, he's like, well, you're getting 3.
Yeah.
You're going to have 3 kids. Yeah. And so we go home and we start to get our ideas together and our heads around having 3 children and being a family of 5. Like, that's just, you go from playing man to zone defense really quickly and really quickly. Like, these 2 are going to be here, and it's just going to be quickly life-changing.
And they're both girls.
Yes. So we go for our next appointment. And we weren't really telling too many people about the pregnancy at this point. I think we told some people we were pregnant, but hadn't revealed twins yet. We'd probably plan to do a really fun reveal for twins. Hey, there's 2. What's the sex? Well, 2 of this, or 1 of this, 1 of that. And we go to our next appointment around 11 weeks, and the ultrasound technician is scanning. First baby looks great, goes to the other one, scans, okay, there's the heartbeat, and then just kind of loses her cool and immediately says, starts measuring things, and something's not right.
Yeah.
She takes us through the back door to the doctor's office and basically puts John and I in 2 chairs and says, wait here, the doctor will be with you shortly.
Which is like all the thoughts going through your mind,
and
right?
I feel for sonographers, because they're not really supposed to tell you anything about what they see. It's supposed to be a doctor that delivers anything medical. But she lost her cool for sure. And so John and I are looking at each other. I'm like, what is it? Like, what's wrong with the baby? Like, there was a heartbeat. What's going on? And, you know, it just, all these fears fill your head really quickly. And the other person's experiencing that too. And maybe a little differently than you are. The fears are hitting them in a different way. And you're about to be experiencing something traumatic together, but also differently.
Right.
So ultimately we find out we are pregnant with 2 baby girls. And one of them has some fluid behind her head. And they think that this could be an indication that she might not make it to birth.
So there was a second heartbeat.
Yes.
She just saw something that was
something that was concerning for the growth of the baby. Okay. Yes. So our doctor tells us that we could be looking at Down syndrome. We could be looking at another genetic abnormality. We could be looking at a heart that's not going to form correctly, but we don't know ultimately. So sends us to get some blood work testing done. We go to genetic specialists. They kind of give us the lowdown on what might be happening. It's a lot of information for one day. Yeah. Very overwhelming. I remember John and I just kind of looking at each other like, okay, we're going to get through this together. Like, whatever it is, like whatever is to come for these 2 babies, we're going to be in this together. And you're just suddenly faced with all these unknowns. You've got the excitement, highs of this, we're having twins too. We might lose one of these twins, or our life might look super different with these 2 twins.
So what did the next trimester look like?
Yeah. So it looked like a lot of doctor's appointments. My husband did not miss a single one. So I've really got a partner with this, and we're going to the doctor every week or every 2 weeks.
And you just wake up every morning thinking like, do I still have 2 in me? Is that a unfair question?
Yeah, you kind of wake up wondering like, what's the day going to bring?
Yeah.
When somebody says, you start to show, and when you're pregnant with twins, you start to show really quickly.
Right. Especially when you had one.
So you have to kind of decide, who are you talking to about what's going on? Like, is it Joe at the grocery store?
Right.
Like, do I need to unload on him right now? He doesn't need my baggage. But like your best friends, and who are you talking to?
Right.
Who's praying for you? Like who's in your circle? We were really fortunate during that time to just have a lot of great family and friends who were just covering us in prayer and support, and just so there for us. We just had so many people do a lot of touching things for us during this time that I've written down, because it means so much to me forever to go through this kind of crazy thing in your life you don't think you're going to go through. And then the way people show up for you is it's just shows you how amazing people are.
Yeah, it's a little gratitude book.
Yeah.
In the worst of times.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really cool to see your good people.
So at what point did you find out something was severely wrong?
Yeah, the tests all came back clear, but we continue to go for ultrasounds, and they continue to tell us that things are not progressing very great with the other baby. Her name is Hope.
So you've named them at this point?
We have not named the other baby.
Okay.
Other baby looks great, and we're kind of putting our focus on Hope right now.
Right.
And I just looked at my husband one day. I was like, her name's Hope, and he's like, absolutely. Like it was just kind of one of those things that this is just what her name was meant to be. So we kind of go and see Hope and our other little baby every week, and we kind of basically watch her die. So it's very heavy. And John didn't miss an appointment because you don't know when you're going to be told that that baby's not there anymore. And he never wanted me to be alone to find out she didn't have a heartbeat anymore.
So I'm sorry. At what week was that?
So ultimately at our 25-week ultrasound, we went in and they would always scan Hope first. And the other baby was, we'd always be checking on her too to see
of course.
If there was any impact. We were always kind of watching the relationship between the two babies to make sure the other baby wasn't affected. And by the grace of God, they were fraternal twins. So they were not sharing a placenta and they were not sharing a sac. So kind of what Hope was going through did not impact our other little girl.
Yeah.
But ultimately the blood flow in her heart was backing up and it wasn't flowing correctly. So we went in at 25 weeks, they did a scan, and again, you've got another poor sonographer who's can't say anything. So she scans the other baby and quickly goes out. And I looked at John and I said, she's gone, isn't she? And he just nodded his head, and I just lost it. It's kind of one of those things you're anticipating. But when it actually happens, it really rocks you. It's just a really raw, tough feeling to be told, yep, that other baby that you've been feeling kick in your belly and has had a heartbeat all this long, and you think maybe something's going to change or like there's going to be a miracle. She's not there anymore. She's gone.
Yeah. So at that point, you leave, you go home, and you have to go to term. Right?
Yeah. And I got to be a mom, and I got to go to work. Still managing the fitness studio.
Correct?
Yes. And I have to carry both twins. So I continue to be monitored, and that's also hard because now we're going in and we're just scanning one baby.
Right.
And so those appointments get more and more depressing.
And you're reminded of
reminded every time. And I'm kind of
like,
like, is she still like, how's she doing? And she's still in there. Like, what's birth going to be like? Luckily, Northside Hospital has an incredible program called Heartstrings.
Okay.
And I got linked up pretty early with one of the bereavement nurses there. And she had a sister who lost a twin at birth. So she was just super sensitive to us. Shout out to Carol at Northside, Carol Shutley. She's awesome. And she just really like gently walked us through like what we might experience over the next couple months and helped prepare us for delivery as well.
Sure.
Yeah. But it's a weird thing because you lose one baby, you would ultimately be induced into labor. But here I am, I have one healthy baby. So you just kind of have to keep going until you go into labor. But we ultimately induced at 37 weeks. They kind of didn't want me to go too far past that. Hope's placenta was starting to kind of leak a little bit. So they were worried that could impact the whole pregnancy. Sure. But other baby girl was super healthy. Never had any complications. We went in trying to not have a C-section. Ultimately had to have a C-section. Didn't have one with Pace. So that was it was quite a crazy just labor. I ultimately, I remember looking at John because they let you decide, which is great. Right. It's your body. And they say, okay, it's not looking like it's going to progress the way we need it to. We're thinking it's time to do a C-section. I remember looking at my husband. I said, let's get that baby girl out. Yeah. Her heartbeat steady right now. Let's get her out healthy. And so we quickly were whisked off to the OR, and then Shelby was born.
Shelby.
Yes,
I love that
girl.
name.
Yes.
Sweet girl.
Yes. So Shelby came, and she's a joy, just a complete joy, and so feisty. I always say she's definitely got the strength of two. Aww. She's always got her little sister Hope like behind her in her corner. She's just
1,000%
the most like little independent. She's just her own little person. Yeah. She's so much fun, and her brother just thinks she's the best thing ever too.
So you leave the hospital with one?
Yeah, I leave the hospital with one. And we did hold
I was going to ask
Hope.
You. Okay.
Yeah, and this is like a thing that
I don't
can
know
be
if people
hard
talk
for
about
people.
this. Yeah.
I don't think people talk about this.
Okay.
Like it's just kind of one of those weird things.
Did you see her?
Yeah, we did. And it was something we had to decide ahead of time. Yeah. We didn't. I mean, we could have waited to decide. Some people do more. Like some people spend more time. Some people will ask not to see it all. But Carol from Heartstrings kind of walked us through all our options, and John and I decided together like what we wanted to do. And we decided we wanted to see her. Like we wanted to know that who she was and that she was here, and kind of really, it just wouldn't have felt real if we hadn't both held her. Yeah. Right. So we did. And then after kind of spent some time with both of them, we turned our attention to Shelby. Sure. Yeah. But I'm so glad we did. I have no regrets about the way we did it. I would have always felt a little lost had we not held her. It just wouldn't have seemed real.
Yeah. So how do you celebrate life and then mourn death at the same time?
Yeah. It's such a crazy thing to try to do those two things at once. I talk about this often with people. I said it's really hard. You go home and you're so excited you have a brand new baby, but everybody who knows you and is in your circle knows you're also mourning the loss of a baby that's not there.
So it's like overshadowing.
Yeah.
Kind of.
And people sometimes will say the wrong things, and it's not their fault. They don't know what to say. Nobody knows what to say in grief when people lose somebody or something doesn't go to plan, or a baby. Yeah. People don't know what to say. And there were a couple things that were said like, well, at least you have one and things like that. And people don't mean bad. I always like give people so much grace because I'm given grace every single day. Yeah. But it is one of those things where you're kind of dealing with like, yeah, I do still have one, and I am so fortunate. Like I still have my baby girl and I have my son, but like we did lose one, and it is a major loss.
Right. So what would you tell people that have a friend or a family member that are going through this type of loss? What do you say? Or you just say, I love you, I support you, and whatever you need?
Absolutely. I just had so many good girlfriends who it would be like a text every week, like, how are you feeling? Or like, how's it going? During and after.
Did you tell, I'm sorry, let's back up. Did you tell anyone at that 25-week point that you had lost one?
Yeah. Everybody who kind of was with us tracking what was happening with the pregnancy, like our family members and our close friends, we let them know that we had lost her at that point.
Because I didn't know until you did a very beautiful Facebook post.
Yes. And it really took a long time to even kind of
put that out there.
Yeah. And even when Shelby was born, it was hard to put out there. Right. Yeah, we did ultimately decide that we wanted to kind of share what we were going through, because it's really awkward every day at work when you have this huge belly. Like I'm pregnant with twins. And then even my belly got a little smaller towards the end too. Really? So it's kind of one of those things where you want people to know, but like you don't want to burden people with your grief if they're not like your super close friends.
Right.
We had enough weight to carry like the heaviness for us.
Yeah.
But I knew this is kind of why you do your podcast, Megan. Like if we don't share these stories, like somebody who's going through something similar is going to feel alone.
They're going to feel alone. They're going to feel like they did something wrong. They're going to feel like it's their fault, that there's karma, you know, all of these things, I'm sure. What other sort of emotions did you go through after? Did you see anyone? Did you go to counseling?
That's a great question. I think it's one of those things, John, I wished we did sooner. We tried to handle it on our own, really turning our attention to the kids. And Shelby was little when she was born because she was a little bit she was 5 pounds, 11 ounces. So she was a petite baby. So I kind of turned and she did not sleep like her brother, feisty little thing. So there was a lot of nights where I was up holding her and really and then going back to work, you're just really trying to make it. The transition to 1 to 2 is difficult. So for a long time, like we were kind of putting the kids first and not putting our marriage first, not putting the grief we were going through. We had a lot of wise counsel and really great. We were both in great men's and women's groups through a ministry.
Okay.
And ultimately around September, when we lost her in September 19th, when we found out she didn't have a heartbeat. So it's kind of, we call that Hope's birthday in heaven. Shelby kind of has her own birthday. Like Hope had already gone.
I love that. Yeah.
Hope was already born.
Yeah.
So she was already seated with Jesus. And to us, that was the time to kind of celebrate both of them together. And we ultimately baptized Shelby around that time and then also did kind of a celebration for Hope.
Beautiful.
And I kept saying to John, like, what do we do? I don't know what to do. And he's like, well, no, just pray about it. Like when the time feels right, we'll have the answer. Like, let's not force anything.
And there's no right answer for anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I would say to somebody, if you're going through something you're trying to force something or doesn't feel right, or someone's telling you to like have a funeral or have this and it doesn't ring true to you, then it's not meant to be the way you're supposed to celebrate things. There's no one size fits all for a grief situation.
Yeah. And ultimately, you know, you go home to you and your husband, you have to do what's right for the both of you.
Yeah, exactly. And we kind of have to do it as a team too. I can't like tell John, well, I want it this way. And he say, I want it this way.
But you eventually did go to counseling, you said?
Yeah. So John and I actually just recently started going to counseling together.
Okay.
Yeah. We,
and how many years ago was this? So how old is Shelby?
So Shelby is 2.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so like maybe 5 months ago, John and I finally said, I've done the work. I found a male and female couple counselor. And he's like, I was like, do you want to do it? And he's like, I've just been waiting for you to ask when. Like, it was just kind of one of those things. He's like, I've always wanted to do it. He's like, but I was just waiting for you to say it was the right time for you.
Why do you think it took so long?
Why do I think it took so long? I think you get caught up in the busyness of life. It's easy to, and this is kind of what I was saying, I'm a busy person. I say yes to a lot of things. It's easier to do the busy minutia and make plans and like crowd your life with busyness than to deal with the problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's so much easier to do the fun stuff or like take another workout class or take on a third job or whatever it is.
Because then you occupy your brain with anything but the pain. You occupy your brain
instead of the pain. Yep. Exactly. Yep. And you don't allow yourself to get deep.
So at what point did you finally say, I need to do this?
Yeah, I think when I realized that like John and I had grieved that situation very differently. Like he and I started kind of talking about it. And I realized that two people, even though they're experiencing the same traumatic event, are going to experience it very differently.
Especially a mother and a father.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like sisters grieving or, you know, siblings grieving their parents' death is one thing, but a mother and a father both losing the same child is got to be so different.
Yeah. So even though we walked it all physically together, like the way we handled it emotionally was very different.
How so?
I think John really focused a lot on just making sure I was okay.
Okay.
And didn't give himself time to maybe grieve for himself.
Because you mentioned something to me, which I didn't even think. He's like, well, we always say like the mom, you lose the baby because you're the one pregnant.
Yeah. And a lot of people kind of forget the spouse in this too, but it's happening to them as well.
Right. And I think he said to you that.
He said to me, you can go out, and he'll tell a lot of people this when he talks about our story with friends. She could go out and every day she was pregnant and somebody would say, "Oh, you're pregnant. What are you having?" He said, I could go out every day and walk out and nobody knew what was going on in my head. Right. He's like, I could just be me. And I didn't have to deal with the constant flood of maybe having to tell someone your story, maybe having to tell someone what's going on. So he said he just really focused on kind of making sure I was okay during that time and then focusing on our baby once she came.
Right. Right.
Yeah. But it's such a grieving thing. He even told me, I don't think he'd mind me sharing this. He had bought, at Christmas, he bought a card to write to her. He writes really, he's so good with words. He writes really beautiful cards to everybody every Christmas, everyone in the family, anyone who's close to him, he writes them a really sentimental card. He's just so great at putting all his thoughts down on a paper. And he told me some months after that, in tears one night, he's like, I bought a card for Hope this Christmas and I didn't write in it. I feel so guilty. And that just broke me for him. I was so sad. I was like, it's okay. Like, he's just like, I couldn't put my thoughts together what I wanted to say. So that's what it made me kind of realize, like, he's got a lot of sadness from this situation too that I can't necessarily help him with.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that affects your marriage, obviously.
For sure.
And the older our kids get, the more you realize how you were raised is going to make how you raise your children differently. Like it's going to make your marriage different. And all these factors are coming into it. It changes things. So we ultimately, I said to him, okay, I finally met these counselors. He's like, great. Just been waiting for you to tell me when. Like, I just wanted you to be the one to want to do it. He's like, I've always been down.
And I think that's so important that it's never too late to get help.
Never.
Never. Even if 10 years have gone by, it's
absolutely.
Still, if it's still there, it's still going to be there.
Of course.
So you have to take responsibility and say, I don't want this to be like this forever. It will never go away. Yeah. Right. But hopefully it'll get better and you're taking the steps. And I want to switch gears a little bit. You've got Pace, who is he 5?
He's 5.5.
He's 5.5. And then Shelby's who's 2.5.
Yep.
So as they're getting older, at what point do you tell them, especially Shelby, that, hey, you were a twin. We lost a daughter. You lost a sister.
That's a question I get a lot too. Like, how are you going to tell the kids about this? And I've read a lot of things of what other people have done. And I have some friends who, through the Heartstrings group I've met, and I've asked them, how are you going to handle this? So you kind of have to decide what's best for you again.
Sure.
And I've always made it very well known to Pace that mommy had 2 babies and one went to heaven early.
Okay.
Yeah. So he knows,
he's known forever.
He knows he has 2 sisters. Yeah. He's like, there's Hope and Shelby, and Hope is in heaven with Grandpa Herb and Grandma Pearl and all the other people.
Right.
And, you know, he can be very matter of fact sometimes too. It's funny. Like the other day he said to our dog, Zoe, when are you going to die? So it's funny when you're trying to talk about these serious things with a 5.5-year-old and you think, oh gosh, they're going to take this so heavy. And sometimes they're just very matter of fact. Right. It's like, yep, they're dead.
But also incredible to, I didn't have to deal with death until I hit 30 years old, really.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost an opportunity.
Yeah, early.
Yeah, very early. And to be able to actually talk to him about the emotions behind it. And hopefully that will turn him into a teenager with a little bit more compassion and grace.
Absolutely.
And a 20,
that's
you know
so
what I mean? Like,
us.
I think that's going to be a huge godsend and takeaway from this tragic situation that you now are raising a little boy that's going to turn into a man who knows how.
We have so much empathy.
Emotion.
He was just born with a lot of empathy and a lot of, Mommy, why this person looks sad? Or like even characters in books, like, oh, that page made me sad. Or he'll look at pictures of when he's a kid and he'll say it made him sad. Like when he was a baby, he's like, because I'm not a little baby anymore. So he's a nostalgic, empathetic little guy. And so we've always talked about it with him early. And I think the older he gets, he kind of grasps it a little bit more.
Sure.
Maybe not when I was pregnant because he was only 2.5.
Yeah.
But now at 5.5, he's understanding things a lot more. And then Shelby is 2.5 and talking so much. And I recently just got a book that's called The Story of My Twin, Hope.
Oh.
And it's a really cute basic children's book, but it shows both the babies with a little bow on their head and the tummy, and you can get them made to have the kids' names in them. So I've been reading to her that.
Where did you find that book, in case anyone is?
It's called lossbooks.com.
Okay.
So LOSS books.com. It's from a lady in England. So they do take like 6 weeks to arrive, but worth the wait.
Very cool.
Yeah. And she has lots of different options. So if it's like a singleton pregnancy, or losing like a twin after they're born. So the books are specific to your situation.
Okay, great.
Yes. So it's a really sweet, very simple book. And Shelby and I have been kind of pointing, I'm like, that's Shelby, that's Hope. So I'm introducing it early without like trying to force it to her. Yeah. Or to make it feel heavy.
Right.
Like right now, it's a normal part of your life.
And again, there's no judgment. You got to do what's right for you. But I would say it's important to talk about it at some point, because when you ignore it, it's almost like taboo.
Oh yeah. I couldn't imagine like waiting till Shelby was 15 and being like, by the way, you were a twin. Like, ooh, that would probably hit me really hard if that happened to me. Like,
and the amount of guilt you might feel as a twin. And she's going to feel that probably anyways.
We kind of worry about like, will she ever feel guilty that she was a surviving twin?
Right.
So trying to get ahead of that early and making this a part of her life. And as she asks questions, her already having kind of this base knowledge, we think it'll be helpful.
And it's, I think you making her Hope is a part of life, right?
Yep.
It's not all about her death. She's still very much a part of our family.
Yeah.
And that will hopefully help with the guilt that she'll feel one day or might feel one day.
Yes.
So I think that's huge. That's really...
and just making it a comfortable thing to talk about, that it's not like everybody gets quiet if you mention baby Hope or anything like that.
Right. And I think you mentioned that you have like a little box of Hope stuff.
Yeah. So
that's how you kind of keep her alive
we have
around
a little box like with her footprints and her handprints, and just some kind of mementos from the hospital and from before, ultrasound pictures and things like that. So we have a little box, and then just a lot of the really nice notes and cards that people wrote to us. I also wrote down her story. Like I took the time to detailed write out while it was fresh in my mind each appointment we had, and detailed kind of what went on so that I can refer back to it. And then if Shelby has questions when she gets older, I have all that there.
That's such a great thing to do, that hopefully anyone who's listening can take away these things from you.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to add, just as far as like what helped you kind of get through it, and now, going to see a counselor, even if it's a couple years later, anything else that really helped?
It's never too late.
Okay.
And John and I we're just really working like on our marriage now, and the trauma of what we went through and past relationships are all things that we're digging into with our counselors. And it's great because those things are so difficult to talk about. Like the counselor will always be like, see, you are really emotional. I'm like, oh, like I'm about to break down and cry. Like, see, this is hitting you really hard. Like, what is it? Dig into it.
Yeah.
So
go there,
I would tell people,
go there.
Yeah. And I had so many friends who were so amazing about being open about, I'm seeing a counselor and like talking about that early, that I'm grateful to those friends who set the seed for making that normal.
Yeah.
Like, thank you to you and the podcast, and for people who are saying, I have a counseling appointment today at 8. Like, thank you for normalizing that, because
1,000%.
like we all have a little something we can be working on, and it's so hard to do alone. So seeking wise counsel and finding the right fit for you. Don't force it. I would say there was a couple counselors I looked at that probably wouldn't have been the right fit for John and I. And then deciding, do you need to do it with your spouse? Do you need to do it individually? Like, what are you hoping to gain?
Sure.
So I would say it's never too late, for sure.
Okay,
and to talk about it with friends, like your people who you think need to know that you're doing things so that they can make a decision to do something similar. Like, don't hold it in. Like, it's so important.
Don't push it under, because it's always going to be there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, let's flip the switch, because you are pregnant again.
I'm pregnant again. That was never supposed to happen at all.
So
shop was closed.
Pace took 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And then, the twins took a little while. And then this one.
And then this one just showed up.
Like,
so this
God
is
was like, hey, guess what?
Yeah. And I was, it's just crazy. I think when you go through a pregnancy like that, and my husband had always wanted 2 children.
Yeah.
So after this happened, he's like, okay, like we're done. We've got Shelby and Pace. Like we're moving forward as a family. We're a 4-pack,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
That's what we got here. And find out somehow right before COVID hits the world that I'm pregnant, and the other ones took so long to make, like
Right.
we were going to make sure there weren't going to be any more and hadn't gotten around to that yet. And we find out we're pregnant. I didn't tell John for like 3 days because I was so worried what his reaction would. I was terrified.
Right.
I called my sister immediately. I was like, I just took a pregnancy test and you're not going to believe it. I'm pregnant. She's like, I don't believe you. I'm like, yep, this is happening.
But
apparently
also,
so.
like, if you never have believed that things happen for a reason, you believe it now,
yes,
right?
You
like,
know, and you go through this traumatic pregnancy, and a part of me closed off even the possibility of having more because I didn't want to be pregnant again after that. Like, I don't want to go to that sad place again. Like, I don't want to put myself in a vulnerable position. And also my we're in a good place. We've got 2, we've got great jobs. Like, let's just enjoy life where we are. But God had other plans, and I'm so grateful for that because we're so excited now. And I'm about 20 weeks and this pregnancy's been really smooth. We're just really fortunate that it's been very different from the last one.
And you're having a baby?
Yeah, don't know. Not finding out. It's a surprise. Yes. We figure the whole thing's a surprise, so we're going to keep the surprises rolling.
And I remember when you told me your story, you know, in March, right before everything hit, and we talked, and then it was the next day.
Yeah, and I was like, so I've got a doctor's appointment, and I'll talk to you when I know what the results of this are.
I was like, no way. I was so excited for you.
It's cool.
You know, there's got to be a sense of fear, right? Oh yeah. Every time you go to the doctor and pray for the heartbeat and pray for a healthy. But you've had all the genetic testing and all that.
Yes,
everything's
had all
golden.
The things. Just had my 20-week ultrasound this week, and everything looks really good.
Great.
So this little baby will be joining the family sometime in October or very early November.
Amazing. Yeah, little football baby.
Yeah, so another little football baby. Yeah. All my kids are born in the fall. So
this is such a beautiful story. And I think it's going to be incredibly helpful for not only, you know, teens and 20-year-olds struggling with relationships, but grief and what it's like to lose a child and what it's like to have other children to have to deal with losing a sibling. Yeah. I just, I'm so grateful you reached out and that you were willing to share your story. And I just, I can't wait to meet this little one.
Yeah. So and I would say people who hear our story, they reach out all the time when they have a friend going through something similar or they're experiencing. I've had a couple people who've lost a twin that have reached out to me, and I've kind of walked them through that. So
how can they get a hold of you?
You can find me on Instagram.
Yeah.
What am I? I'm private, but send me a message. I'll find you. I'm Kelly H. Gator, and I'm happy to talk to anybody going through any kind of loss like this.
And they can always reach out to me at 6 Feet Above Podcast, and I will send them your way.
Sure.
And like the more that we talk about this hard stuff, the less hard it will be.
Yep.
Right? It's always going to be there, but you're never alone.
Get connected with people who have been through, even if it's not the same as yours, like nothing's the same, but get connected with someone who can tell you you're not alone.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kel. This is amazing.
Thanks, Meg. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the 6 Feet Above podcast. I'm your host, Megan Armstrong. Subscribe so you never miss another episode, as a new episode is released every Tuesday. And if you're enjoying the series, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Follow the show on Instagram at 6 Feet Above Podcast to keep the conversation going, and feel free to reach out to me directly at Megstagram11. This episode is a product of Audiographies, produced by Megan Armstrong and Denora Sepolia, edited by Jacob Smolian, and the music is by Keenan Willis. Funded by yours truly. I'll see you next time.